Welcome to the Power of Nature podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Waldo. In this show, I talk about how nature and the natural world can communicate with us, how it can communicate directly and individually with each of us, and how this can create immeasurable benefits for us in our lives. I share stories of my experiences doing this as part of a regular and ongoing practice, and I talk to others about their experiences with the power of nature as well. So join me as we go on a journey of learning about the power of nature, how it can communicate directly with us, and the impact that it can have on our own lives. Welcome back to the Power of Nature podcast. In today's episode, I want to talk about my experience with two coyotes or maybe young wolves on our property. And really this topic is about letting our wild be wild and allowing the beauty of that. So let's just dive right in. The other day I woke up and I heard like a noise in our house, and not like a scary noise, but like a kid that seemed to be awake or somebody that was walking down the hallway, and it seemed a little early. So I kind of was startled awake, I guess, and I walked out into the house and didn't see anyone. Looked in my two kids' rooms and saw them both sleeping and kind of was like, what did I hear? What was it that woke me up? And it turns out it did take me a couple minutes to get from hearing the noise to actually waking up enough and getting out of bed. And I later learned that one of my sons had gotten up to get a drink of water in kind of like a groggy state and just went back to sleep. So by the time I walked in, it did not look like he had been anywhere, but he had been the one that had walked down the hallway. So that was that explanation. But somehow I think I walked into this other room and I looked outside for a second. Like, I didn't try to look outside. I just happened to glance outside and I saw something dart across you could call it our backyard. Our backyard isn't really a yard. It's a pasture we use in the summer as like a third pasture for our horses. So it kind of has like a fence, like a electric fence that's not activated right now around it, and we only use it in the summer months when there's a lot of grass there. And I had looked out into this field, and there's kind of like a whole grassy area that's a clearing, and then there's trees, very tall, like pine, evergreen type trees all around it. And I looked out and I saw this thing running across, and I was like, what is that? And I was kind of half asleep. And then I was like, that is either a coyote, a very large one, because I've been around coyotes. So a pretty large coyote, or a young wolf, or a dog, like a large dog, like our dog, my son's dog, which is a pretty large dog. And so I quickly kind of checked to make sure that our dogs were in the house, and they were. So it wasn't our tall dog, which, by the way, has coloring that could be confused with, especially from a distance, could be confused with a coyote or a wolf. And I saw that our dogs were inside, and then I saw this animal. Again, still don't know if it's a bigger coyote or a young wolf, and it had a a friend with it. So it ran across the field and was kind of running. And then I saw another one kind of like in the among the brush along the other side of the pasture. And then they joined up and then they kind of like ran out through the end. And of course, by the time this all happened, because it all happened very quickly, I said to my husband, look, hey, there's either coyotes or wolves in our yard. But by the time he looked, they were gone. They were in the woods and you couldn't see them anymore. But it felt like this, I don't know, it really felt like this magical thing, because they were just having fun. They were playing. Now, my experiences with coyotes really started when I lived in California. I don't think I'd ever had an experience with coyotes before that. So hearing them kind of in the distance, and then when we lived in the East Bay of California, at the last house we lived at that we owned, we would see coyotes on hikes and stuff like that too, and we would hear them because we had this open space near us. I'll never forget the first night we heard them. It was we just had a big birthday party for my oldest son, and just kind of like we're exhausted afterwards, and we're sitting in the house kind of recovering after everyone left with all their kids, because it was like a lot of like boy energy for hours and lots of activity and parents to entertain, and it was fun, but it was tiring, and it was just kind of one of those like, oh, okay, let's just take a moment. And then we heard this like sound, like, yip, 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 like howling. And it sounded like it was in our house. And it wasn't in our house. It wasn't a sound that was in our house, but it was very nearby our house. And thus began our acquaintance with living near an open space that had a lot of coyotes, and we would hear them pretty frequently. And we kind of got used to it. As a matter of fact, one time I was even walking, and a coyote came down the street, not like aggressively or anything. It was very thin. I think it was ill, a little ill, not super ill, but a little bit off. But I saw it pretty close up. And then when we would walk up in the fields, we would sometimes see them again, not close up. They were respectful, but we could see them. So I've seen a lot of coyotes in my time. I also know that coyotes live here in Montana and wolves live here in Montana. Now, we had started hearing coyotes here in Montana probably about 9 months ago in the night, hearing them, and then hearing them again kind of loudly, and they often would be in the woods behind our house. There's a large lot of several acres where it's just all wooded and trees and kind of more dense, and we would hear them coming from there. And so we know that we have that. We've actually been pretty cautious about like not letting our dogs out at certain times, and being very careful about all of our animals, etc. And when I first heard that, I also was nervous about going out to feed the horses, because even though I've not had a bad experience with coyotes, it's kind of like almost like still ingrained in me, like, ooh, be cautious of what might be out there in the woods, which is so crazy because I love nature. But I also realized I lived in the city for a long time, and, it's like you get almost like programmed to think that anything in the woods is also gonna get you and scary. I experienced this, I'll never forget, when I went to Alaska. I went to Alaska to run a marathon in the late 90s in Anchorage, Alaska. And as part of that, I also took a couple of days and went to some other places. And I was convinced that basically a grizzly bear was going to come out anytime I left the city limits, because, you know, grizzly bears exist in Alaska and they would just come out and get you. I was convinced, you know, that like the moment I stepped out of the city streets that I would just be gotten by a grizzly bear. And it's not to say, because I live in Montana and we have grizzly bears here, and it's not to say to be, you know, to be naive about the fact that wildlife lives here and that, you know, wildlife is wild for a reason. You know, you're not supposed to go up and like get a selfie with wildlife like we see all the time, you know, little memes and videos of people that do that in Glacier National Park or in Yellowstone. And it's not wise. But I also know that nature, I love nature and I love wildlife. And I really want to live in harmony with nature and wildlife. And, you know, in most cases, when I am not in any kind of state of fear, that wildlife just does what it's going to do. And I respect it and I am fine. And that's the way, you know, even though I'd been nervous about coyotes in our backyard, or in the backwoods, when we first started hearing them here in Montana, you know, I felt that way when I saw these coyotes or perhaps young wolves in our back pasture, backyard just the other morning. It's like they were just doing their coyote or wolf thing. You know, they were having fun and they have every right to the land as much as anyone else. And I really felt that. And I really feel like part of my journey of coming to a state of awareness like this has also come along with a state of awareness of allowing all parts of myself. Like, it's like the coyotes or wolves or whatever those animals were, they're the wild, you know, they live in the wild here. Well, I have wild in me too. I have wild in me that may not be a coyote or a wolf, but it's the wild in me that is sometimes the parts of me that I maybe don't think I should have, or I think I don't want to allow, or, you know, isn't what I expected. But what I've come to understand is that the more that I allow and listen to myself and allow myself to respect and allow the wild of where I live, the more I also allow the wild of me, and vice versa. The more I allow the wild of me, the more I respect and allow the wild of nature, because I realize we're all, you know, part of this larger ecosystem called Earth. And, you know, I don't believe in the idea that we people, humans, are meant to dominate. I don't believe that. I believe that we are really here to live in harmony with all of the wild and all of nature. And that when we learn to embrace nature and respect nature and allow nature, we learn so much about it. We learn so much about ourselves, and it benefits us. And I talk all about that in the show. But I've also learned that, you know, like we can so easily find something that we think feels wild, quote unquote wild, which means unfamiliar or unknown or unsafe or like, why is something wild make us nervous? Because we kind of feel like it's unpredictable, it's unknown, it's wild. We don't know what it's going to do. We don't know what it's going to do. But I have found that the more that I listen to my inner self and tune into my inner self and the harmony of all that's around me, the more that I find that I live in sync and in harmony and in alignment with that wild in nature, with the wild of the trees and the plants and the wildlife around me. And I also find that I live in harmony more with allowing the wild in me, the maybe the unknown parts of me that I maybe previously didn't want, or I was afraid of, or I was uncertain of. And one of the things I've come to understand is that there's so many times when there are parts of me that I didn't realize were parts of me. It's like I was afraid of certain things in the unknown that I've come to understand in embracing all of that. It's like I open up to a more real and harmonious and peaceful experience of myself. I had an experience about a week ago, maybe. I was talking to my husband about some stuff going on with a family member, and it reminded me of a period in the early 2000s when I was studying shamanism. I studied shamanism. I became a shamanic practitioner. I don't practice shamanism anymore. But what really what really attracted me to shamanism was this whole connection with nature and the natural world and animals. I since have come to learn that I have like a indigenous native, I don't know what the term is, Native American in me. From Canada, and maybe that's part of the draw as well. But it was during this period when I was studying shamanism, and one of the things, the kind of shamanism that I was practicing was tied into some other studies of like energy medicine and energy and kind of meditative type practices and all kinds of spiritual stuff. And one of the things that I had happen is as part of shamanism, I had like these power animals in shamanism. It's this perspective that you have these guides that you tune into. I have a different perspective now because I've come to realize that these guides are actually part of our larger consciousness that we're all connected in, but I'm not going to really go into that right now. But I had, developed relationships with these different power animals, and it was so weird because I had like a series of dreams during that time period. And I was also like looking at my dreams a lot and working with my dreams as a way of understanding communication from my own inner self more. And I had the dreams where like these wild animals were chasing me. And the wild animals were kind of similar to some of the animals, the species that I had as power animals. And it was confusing because like my power animals were like my friends. They were like my guides. They were like helping me navigate and understand more about myself and the world and come to greater awareness. But yet I had these dreams in which a not my exact power animals. I could tell they were different, but like different animals of the same species that were kind of running towards me, running to me, and I was scared. Like I thought they were trying to attack me. And what I came to realize many years later, and have more clarity on this recently, was that they were not trying to attack me. They were like parts of my own awareness and my own power and my own connection with nature and my own inner self and heart and soul and source, that is at the heart of nature as well. My own wildness that was trying to communicate with me, trying to open me up to new levels of awareness of things I was calling in myself that I wanted to experience, but it's like I kind of had these like old fears and misconceptions that were stopping me from experiencing it. And it's like these animals that were chasing me seemed like they were coming to attack me, but they weren't. It was a whole set of misconceptions because it was really my own power, my own wildness, my own truth trying to communicate with me. But at the time, it felt scary. I didn't understand how to process it. I didn't understand how to embrace what was being offered to me. And instead, I felt fear. And I feel like this is something that we, as someone who, I grew up in Pennsylvania, first was from a suburban part when I was really little, and then moved to central Pennsylvania, more in a town. So I lived in the downtown, but then I was out a lot with the horses in nature, out in fields and pastures and barns, and kind of dropped off and left to my own devices for hours. And I lived that way for a long time. And then I lived in cities, and my experiences in nature were more just like daylight hikes or camping or whatever. But I had developed fears of the wild, like without even knowing it. Like a long time ago, I remember going hiking or camping on Mount Shasta with my husband. And I remember in the night feeling really scared, like, oh my gosh, something is going to come from the wild, like basically bears are just waiting around the corner to get me, or some unknown thing was going to come out of the wild and get me. It never happened. I never experienced that. I'm not saying be silly with wild animals and go right up to wild animals and take selfies, or not realize that they're wild. They deserve our respect, and there's a reason that they have learned to be away from humans. But I have also realized that there are a lot of messages about what is in the wild or what is wild should be feared automatically as dangerous. And I feel like what I've come to realize is it's not about what should be feared as dangerous and therefore we should defend against it or control against it. What I've come to realize is it can be respected. That when we treat wildlife and nature with respect, we can experience such amazing, amazing gifts and wisdom and teachings from it. And that's what I talk about in this show. But so many times I've experienced, even in my time living here in Montana and having this property, we have just under 5 acres, and It seemed really vast in the beginning because it was like the biggest amount of property I've ever had and lived on. And we have wild animals, that live on this property or adjacent to us, coyotes or young wolves, and I think we had a bear on our property the first year we moved here, somewhere in the back area, because my horse acted like something, and the mule next door that had lived there for many years also acted like something was there. So it was, it could have been miles away, because horses and mules can really smell things, but somewhere in the vicinity, was likely a bear or a mountain lion. And we for sure have coyotes, and maybe these two animals in my backyard were coyotes or they were either for sure coyotes or possibly young wolves, one of the two. But they are not. I've come to understand time and time again that nature is something to respect. Nature is something that can teach us and open us up to things that are so beneficial to us. And that nature and wildlife can help us learn things about ourselves that we're calling to know about ourselves. That dream that I talked about, those series of dreams that I had in the early 2000s, they weren't trying to scare me. They weren't trying to terrify me. They were trying to help me bring my own awareness of my truth and my power and what I am back to myself, to live in a way more in sync with who I am and what I am at my core, which is in alignment with nature. It is in alignment with all of the natural world. I am the one that perceived, because of misconceptions culturally taught or that I had taken on or whatever, had come to believe that things that were coming to me that felt foreign or that I had believed could be scary or dangerous, because out of the gate, that's just what I believed they would be. I experienced fear when all those things were trying to do in my dreams was help me become more of me. Become more of the wild me that is the beautiful me, that is the natural me, that is the true me. And that's what I was reminded of by these two coyotes or wolves that were in my backyard or backwoods, back pasture the other day. They have every right to exist, and I want them on our land, just like I want our deer and I want our chickens. And there are divine, forces at play with all of nature. I'm going to actually tell a little story. As part of my journey in shamanism, one of the things that I came to understand, I used to not like spiders at all. And this is another thing I came to understand, that just like I feared spiders back then, I really, really feared my own creativity. I really was afraid of my own creativity. I believed it was dangerous. I believed it was scary. I believe it took me into places I didn't know. I believed it was like, I could just go into a whole bunch of things. For me to say now that I am an artist has been a long journey. And I am an artist. And I say that unabashedly, unashamedly, unhesitantly. And I sit in my office / art studio surrounded by paintings I've created. And my podcasts are a creation as well. They are an expression of my own creative energy and power as well. But it's been a long journey to get to this place. And I have a podcast about creativity called Art Flow with Michelle Waldo. If you are interested, check it out. It's a newer podcast. But back in my shamanism days, I did not really, I knew I was somewhat creative, but in a very, very different way than I think about now. And so one of the things that I had is I was scared of spiders. I never liked spiders. They seem too uncertain. They seem too unknown. They seem too unpredictable. Are you detecting a pattern here? That's the way I felt. And so, you could have just blown me over with a feather when in my shamanism days I discovered that I had a guide that was a spider. And guess what that spider taught me about? Creativity. Learning about creativity and coming to embrace my own creativity and creative power and learning to not be afraid of it. And it was this crazy thing because it was this amazing spider that was so scary that also helped me to embrace my own creativity, which at that time was so scary, so terrifying. It does not make any sense now when I see the beauty that my creativity gives me. But I had a whole bunch of mixed up confusions and conceptions about my own creativity and my own flow and who I was and whatever. And all of that was all tied up in my creativity and my creative power. And I was scared of it. And I didn't want anything to do with it, really. But my inner self knew that I was a creative being and that I loved creating and I wanted to create more, and I always had, and that there was just a bunch of misconceptions about who I was and what I could be and what I could do about my creativity. It was like the wild that I feared. It was the uncertainty that I feared, the unknown that I feared. I didn't like it. I didn't know where my creativity would take me, and that scared me, just like I didn't know where the wild and the woods would take me and what could be out, and it scared me. And it took this amazing power animal in these days of studying shamanism to help me start to learn about my own creativity and start to embrace it and start to accept it and start to understand. And I have found that nature and the natural world, you don't have to study shamanism. You don't have to, do any of that. To start to embrace and understand what nature can teach us and how nature can teach us to embrace parts of ourselves that we really want, that are who we truly are. I have found this time and time again. But I came to learn about creativity, and I came to learn often. I would find in the years since then, as I went on a journey of embracing my creativity more and more, I would find that spiders would pop up at times when I was calling myself to embrace my creativity more. It's like a spider would pop up, and I started to learn not to be afraid of it, but to see the wildness in that spider and to not be afraid of it, and instead to respect it and to appreciate its presence and its message. And I had this happen a lot, basically over the last 25 years, lots of spiders coming to me. So here's something that happened the other day. that was really interesting. I hadn't really, I embrace my creativity a lot. Like I said, I call myself an artist. I'm painting. The other day, I had an experience where I think I maybe was calling my own creativity, I don't know, maybe to a new chapter. Who knows? I don't know. I wasn't aware of that. Here's what I was aware of. I was sitting on my front deck, and a couple of our chickens had gotten loose, and I decided to sit down and just kind of see if they came over, because it's really cool when our chickens come over. They come over and they say hello and they kind of talk to me, and it's very sweet. And I kind of was like, felt a calling to just sit and let the chickens kind of come over to me if they wanted to. Not force them, because they were doing their scratch and peck thing in the grass, but if they wanted to. So I was sitting there and I was watching them, and I was just enjoying being out. It was a beautiful day, and then I saw a spider. I saw a spider out on the kind of walkway to our front door, and I was like, ooh, a spider. I haven't seen spiders in a long time. And this was a beautiful spider. And it's taken me a long time. It took me a long time to be able to call a spider beautiful. But really, I did feel the beauty in this spider. And the spider kind of walked up onto the pavement, and I was like, ooh, maybe there's a message in this, a message of my creativity. And it's so crazy because what happened almost like at the speed of light. It was almost like fast forward, what is it called? Fast motion. Not the opposite of slow motion, but sped up motion, whatever. I don't know. My brain is eluding me right now as the term. But it was almost like everything was going in like fast motion, because what happened is I saw the spider. I had this like awe moment. My chicken was kind of like maybe about 10 feet away. The chicken decided to walk over towards me at that moment. And I was like, oh, and then I had this moment. I had this moment of, oh my gosh, because I've seen the chickens eat bugs. They eat bugs, they eat worms, they eat, I guess, spiders. I never really thought about it. But I had this moment of realizing the chicken was headed my way and the spider was nearby. And I had a moment of, oh my gosh, I hope the chicken doesn't see the spider. And it was almost like everything happened at fast speed, because the chicken made its way towards me. My awareness of the spider was there. And then the chicken went into high speed motion. And with just the quickest, like blink of an eye, swept over, ate the spider, and darted off. And I was just sitting there with my mouth open, because my chicken, which I love, just ate the spider, which I've come to really respect and appreciate. And I was kind of like baffled. Like just kind of feeling like, like I had almost been just shot. Almost. I was kind of like in shock for a moment. And then it came to me, a realization about this. It came to me the way messages from nature and animals come to me. And it was a message of, there is a divine flow. There is a divine flow in nature that always has things in harmony. And I may not always understand how or why it's happening, but the divine flow is always in the highest good of all, and it kind of like gave me a whole awareness, like I love my chickens and I love that spider. And I realized that I don't feel like the spider was harmed by the chicken. I mean, yeah, it was eaten by the chicken. There's no doubt about it. But like the spider became a fuel for the chicken that I love. And it was all kind of in harmony. And so much I find that is in nature. Like there is a divine harmony to all that happens in nature and why it happens and how it happens. And so often we people, we don't like the way something looks, or we think it's too wild, or it's too uncontrolled, or it's too scary, or it's conflicting with our demands of what we think we want, or what we think we need, or what we think we have the rights to. And we get out of sync of the harmony of the nature and the wild. But the chicken and the spider reminded me that there is always a harmony and a flow in nature, in the natural world. Chickens eat bugs and chickens eat spiders, and coyotes and wolves eat chickens, and they eat rabbits and they eat other things. And all of it is all part of a beautiful cycle of life that I find that the more that I tune into my inner self and flow and listen to my inner self, the more I find myself experiencing a harmony and a peace and a joy of tuning into and allowing that harmony of nature and that flow of nature, and to respect it. And I respect those coyotes. I respect the coyotes or the wolves in our yard. And I respect them, even if they do, someday get our chickens. And I've worried about this. I've worried about our chickens. Having an eagle. I love the eagles and the hawks on our property, but I've worried about our chickens. What if our chickens get, what if one of our chickens gets eaten by a hawk or an eagle or a coyote or a wolf or whatever, a fox? I love our chickens, and yet I love our foxes. And I love our coyotes or wolves, and I love our eagles, and I love our hawks. And I love the wild in me, and I love the wild that I live around. And I've come to understand that the more I listen to my inner self and the more I become in sync with the natural world, the more I live in harmony with it, and the more I come to see there is harmony and there is a divine plan, and that there is beauty and amazing balance in all of it. And that when I, in my human self, try to get angry, or I get angry and I want to control things, I want to get mad at the chicken for eating the spider, or I want to get mad at the coyote or wolf for being on my property for fear that it might do something, I'm out of sync. I'm out of sync with the harmony of nature, and I'm out of sync with the harmony of the wildness in me and the wildness in this world. And it doesn't serve me. And it never serves me. And that's what I wanted to talk about in today's episode. I don't know if you can hear what sounds like a coyote or a hyena in the background, but that is my son's dog. And apparently someone just came home. I think it's my husband. And our dog, the bigger dog, she makes all kinds of noises. So you might hear that. But that is also my cue to sign off for today and leave it at that. So that is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to leave it at that until the next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Power of Nature podcast. To learn more about me and my other offerings, you can visit my website at michellewaldo.com. That's MICHELLEWALDO.com.